All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to the Explainer. I am so glad you're here. Look, if you're the kind of person who likes to cut through the absolute noise of politics to find the structural core of what's really going on, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're analyzing a super concentrated piece of source material. It's titled Cracks in the Gilded Caucus. Now, it's incredibly brief. We're talking literally just 2 sentences, but man, it is absolutely packed to the brim with tension. Let's unpack exactly what this source is telling us step by step and explore the deep political realities hiding right there in plain sight. Right off the bat, Crocs in the Gilded Caucus is just a phenomenal hook. I mean, it perfectly captures the underlying tension we're about to dive into. When you hear gilded, you instantly think of something shiny, solid, and totally dominant, right? Like an exterior that's wealthy, unified, and impenetrable. But then you throw in the word cracks, and boom, you immediately introduce this concept of vulnerability, structural stress coming from the inside out. It suggests that what looks rock solid on the surface might actually be under intense pressure underneath. And that's exactly what this text zeroes in on, that stark contrast between external perception and internal friction. Okay, let's dive into this because the entire text basically operates on a massive dichotomy. On one side, you have the macro reality, and on the other, the micro friction. In any kind of political analysis, understanding the scale of a situation is absolutely crucial, because what goes down on the national stage doesn't always match what's happening behind closed committee room doors. And the author is explicitly asking us to hold these two totally contrasting realities in our heads at the exact same time. It's not an either-or thing, it's presented as a both-and situation. We've got a broad reality coexisting with a narrow, localized friction. Let's look at how the text actually defines those two levels. Stepping into the specifics here, at the macro level, the text explicitly calls the former president the clear leader of the Republican Party. That's the overarching environment. But, and here's the stark contrast, at the micro level, specifically within the legislative branch, it notes a weakening grip on Capitol Hill. Now, as impartial observers of this text, it's not our job to validate or invalidate these political realities. Our job is just to map out the framework the author built. And they're intentionally putting overarching, undeniable party dominance right up against a very specific, localized erosion of influence. Huge power in the aggregate, but shrinking control in the particulars. It's a really fascinating paradox. Let's zoom in on that first half of the paradox for a second. The source establishes a really strong baseline fact right out of the gate. It affirms that President Donald Trump's broad leadership of the GOP remains firmly intact. By using that exact phrase, clear leader, the text just completely removes any ambiguity about his status with the wider Republican base and the party infrastructure. And structurally, establishing that massive macroscopic foundation first, that makes the contrast in the second half of the excerpt hit so much harder for the reader. It sets you up expecting total control, only to immediately pull the rug out with the messy realities of day-to-day governance. So the crucial point is the text introduces a stark exception to this broad rule of dominance. Let's call it the Capitol Hill exception, because it is isolated entirely to the legislative branch. Even while commanding the Rider Party on a national scale, the source is telling us the dynamic flips dramatically once you step inside the physical halls of Congress. The text pivots so sharply from the national mood to the highly specific everyday realities of lawmakers actually trying to govern. The machinery of legislation just runs on different rules and different pressures than national politics, and the text zeroes right in on exactly where those gears are starting to grind. All right, let's objectively break down what the text says is going down among lawmakers, really isolating that micro friction. First, the focus gets laser tight on Republicans in Congress. Second, it identifies the prevailing emotion as growing frustration. And hey, notice that phrasing. It's not a sudden snap. The word growing implies a compounding trend over time, like a slow build of pressure. And third, the fallout of that frustration is characterized as a weakening grip by the leadership. Basically, the text is painting a picture of a really restless caucus, where the usual levers of influence are just kind of losing their effectiveness. Now, what's really interesting about this dynamic is the exact catalyst the source provides for all this congressional frustration. It doesn't just vaguely say lawmakers are mad, it tells us exactly why. It points to what the lawmakers view as increasingly brazen decisions. And notice how carefully the text qualifies that. What they view as brazen. It's totally acknowledging the subjective perspective of those folks on Capitol Hill. Brazen is such a heavy, powerful word choice by the author. It implies actions that are bold, convention-defying, totally lacking hesitation. And according to the text, that right there is the exact root cause of the friction. The nature of these decisions is the wedge. And this brilliantly illustrates the direct cause and effect chain the text outlines regarding the events of a second term. Let's literally trace the logic together. Step 1, the second term begins. That sets the stage. Step 2, during this time, decisions occur that congressional members view as brazen. Step 3, as a direct reaction to those specific decisions, Capitol Hill Republicans grow increasingly frustrated. And finally, Step 4, that built-up frustration directly results in a weakening of the leadership's grip in Congress. The author is laying out a highly specific step-by-step argument about how executive action is actively impacting legislative cohesion, one step inevitably leading to the next.
So what does this all mean? Well, it brings us to the ultimate unknown presented by this analysis. How will these second-term decisions impact overall party leadership in the long run? The source material leaves us balancing right on the edge of this massive inherent tension. This super brief text perfectly isolates a deeply complex political dynamic. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep seeking clarity and always look closely at the text. Because, as we watch this all unfold, we really have to ask ourselves, can the broad, macro reality of party leadership stay completely insulated? Or will those cracks in the builded caucus eventually spiderweb outward?